guys good? Start. Sorry about the delay. Yeah. So my name is Mike. This is David. We're both engineering managers at ZeroFox. Have any of you guys heard of ZeroFox before? 1, 2, 3. Okay. You've been there longer. You want to give a quick little pitch on what ZeroFox does?
Sure. Let me think of the most recent marketing approved terms. I'd say we're a digital risk management company. So the way that I like to describe it is our customers, we basically monitor your digital presence for bad stuff, alert you to the bad stuff, and help you remediate the bad stuff. So this could, run the gambit of possible use cases. So when we first started, we were primarily a social media company. So we would say monitor your Facebook presence for maybe impersonating accounts. So someone who's like making a fake David D'Annunzio account, we'd let you know when they're out there. Or maybe if you're like a bank, we would monitor Instagram for financial scams. So someone posting like, hey, like I'm Bank of America, and if you click on this link and open an account with us, you'll get 10% off of your fees or something, and it's a phishing campaign. So those are like two examples. But now it's far more than social. So we have monitoring of like pay sites and dark web for things like social security numbers, personally identifiable information. We also have image analysis for things like that same type of information, but like trying to say like, oh, well, does this Instagram post have PII in it based on just the image? It may not be text. So that's kind of the high level. But honestly, all of our customers have very different needs, and we service a lot of different use cases for them. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think that's a pretty good high level.
Yeah, and so what we tend to look for are not to use too many buzzwords, but full stack, well-rounded web developers, right? Basically the same thing that any large tech company will look for, right? We use Python, we use Go, we use JavaScript, we use MySQL, Postgres. I mean, very common web systems here, right? And so basically, if you can master basic computer science fundamentals, we want to talk to you. Right? We don't care if you've ever touched Python before. If you only know Ruby or Java or C++, I don't know what Towson. When I was going to school, it was just Java and C++. Right? They didn't really teach web languages. But honestly, we don't really care about that. Right? I mean, we are looking primarily for good developers who can learn quickly. So let me quickly go through our backgrounds. My name is Mike Klein. I went to USC out in LA for my computer engineering degree. Then I went to go work at Yahoo for the Yahoo sports team, building fantasy apps, building stuff for Siri, and I was there for about 4 years. And I was out at their headquarters in Sunnyvale, in Silicon Valley. And then I co-founded a startup called Parabola, where I was a CTO for about 3 or 4 years. Then I moved back here in the last year or so, and now work at ZeroFox. First I was a principal software engineer, and then I moved into management, so now I'm a software engineering manager. And that is essentially it. You were asking me earlier why I moved back. Yeah, essentially I moved back. I'm from here, I'm from Baltimore, grew up in Baltimore. Went out there for school and stayed out there. Obviously there's a lot of tech jobs out there, but my end game was to kind of come back here for family. So I'm very interested in kind of getting the Baltimore, Mid-Atlantic startup scene kind of cranked up, right? DC's kind of got it going, Boston kind of has it going, and I think with Columbia and Baltimore, even the last year as I was interviewing, there were a lot of new startups in the area, a lot of seed stage, Series A stage, even some Series B stage. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with VC investment, but so there's a lot of growth to be had in the area. Traditionally, I think a lot of people in this area tend to either move away or they go into defense contracting, or they go like the Booz Allens or companies like that. And I think that it's kind of an exciting time where there's a lot of new startups coming up that kind of creating a mini valley scene in Maryland, which is pretty cool.
I'm the opposite of Mike. I grew up in California and then went to college out here at Swarthmore College, which is outside of Philadelphia. And then I have never gotten out of the Mid-Atlantic since. So I moved to DC, worked at a company called O-Power, which was a behavioral energy efficiency company. Worked there for about 2 years. I timed it really well. I started when there was like 150 people. By the time I left, there were like 500, and we IPO'd, and then I left a few months later after I moved to Baltimore and then came to Zero Fox about 4.5 years ago, and have been in Baltimore ever since then. So.
Not sure what happened there. Cool. Okay, so basically I want this to be as much of a Q&A session as you guys are able to give, right? I brought 2 examples, not specific code examples, but just kind of broad case examples of 2 types of questions we might ask in a technical interview. But there are hundreds of questions that we might ask someone depending on your background, depending on the specific projects that are coming up. So I really want you guys to kind of drive this. You know, ask me questions about things that you guys are concerned about. I mean, who here's done interviewing already? And how many of you have done, whiteboarding coding questions for an internship or full-time? Only 1, 2 people? So the other interview, when you guys did interviews, there was no coding questions. You did coding questions, okay. But the rest of you have never been in a coding interview before?
It was not like writing code, no. Yeah.
What was it like?
It was just like, it asked me like fundamental questions about coding. So like backends of like Java and like other stuff that I know. They were just asking me questions about that. They didn't ask me like to write down code to solve a problem.
Got it, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I think traditionally, I guess it depends on the company.
Yeah.
We ask, usually before you get to an on-site stage, so at a phone screen stage, we'll usually ask you at least 1 coding question. If you have an amazing experience, if you look at your resume and you've contributed to all these open source projects, maybe we won't ask you a coding question, we'll ask you to dive deep into explaining how you built something. That's pretty rare for college graduates without much experience, right? So normally we're gonna test you guys with a coding question. And then you'll come to an on-site interview, right? Who's done on-site interviews? We're actually on-site a couple, okay. And when you did it, how long was?
It was like 3 or 4 hours.
3 or 4 hours, yeah. That's pretty typical. And like 1 person per hour? Yeah, it's exactly how we do it. So you come in, we always do 4. Usually it's 3 engineers or engineering managers, and then the 4th is usually our VP. And I'd say at least 2 out of the 4 are going to be coding questions. What was it for you?
There was a lot of SQL stuff, like
Database design?
yeah.
Okay.
That kind of stuff. I wish I took a class on it before.
Right. Yeah. Do you guys? How many here? Well, first of all right. So raise your hand if you're a senior. Okay. What about juniors? And underclassmen? Freshman, sophomore? No one? Okay. So everyone's a junior or senior here. Okay.
I'm a grad student.
Or okay, I should have started with that. So and how many of you have done? So you guys are juniors, seniors, or above. How many have done a database class? Okay, so is that part of the curriculum?
Yeah.
That is okay. And is it all relational database? So MySQL.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What about NoSQL databases? Do you guys go over any of that?
We're doing that in our 44 class with MongoDB.
Mhm.
So that's
Okay.
our NoSQL, yeah.
But it's not required.
No, it's elective.
It's an elective.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good. I mean, it didn't used to be required to take SQL classes. I guess it's a lot more popular now, which is good. So let me dive kind of high level into what we look for. So when we give a coding question, I think a lot of candidates come in and they're kind of worried. I have to get this right answer, or I'm not going to get hired. Right? You're kind of certain. I'll interview someone and the candidate will sit there for 10 minutes. Just looking at me, I can tell the wheels are turning. I have no idea what he's thinking or she's thinking because all they're trying to do is come up with that perfect answer, right? We are not looking for a right answer. This is no matter what we ask you, right? We are looking for your ability to reason through a problem and talk through solutions. right? So when I'm sitting down with a candidate, I'm basically pretending this isn't an interview. I'm pretending that you and I are working on something, and our boss just gave us some assignment, and we came in here with this problem, and let's see what we can come up with, right? So if you're in a real work setting and you sit there, blank eyed for 10 or 15 minutes with a coworker, like that's odd, right? So don't do that in an interview. So all we want to see is your ability to reason through a problem and talk through solutions. When we give you coding questions, we don't care if you know the syntax of a specific language. I want to see that you have computer science fundamentals, right? You see a problem, can you attack it properly? Can you attack it using, do you know what O of n runtime is? Are you gonna give me a solution that is, not going to crash our servers when it runs through a million data set, right? A million row data set. Do you have proper design patterns? Can you do object oriented? Do you use proper data structures, right? Are you using arrays when you should have used a hash map? Are you using a hash map when a tree would have done better, right? A lot of it I know seems kind of theoretical when you're learning about it in school, but in practice, it's the difference between loading an app and it taking a millisecond or it taking like 500 milliseconds. And that's a big difference. Like it's a big difference if every single call is a half second versus almost instant. And so those little tiny things that you learn in school, you're like, oh, this doesn't really matter, right? I could bang out a couple lines of Python, and it'll do it either way. It matters when you're running through a table of 10 billion rows, right? So we're looking for these things. Have you learned these things, and are you able to apply them to a straightforward problem? And I think the last thing is probably the most important, right? If you do the first, steps 2 and 3, but not 4, you are abrasive, or you're not willing to take criticism, you're just not someone we're going to want to work with, then we will cut the interview short. Like there is no point in wasting our time, right? When we interview someone, like you just said, right, it's 4 hours of interview time, right? I don't know if you guys have started to get offers, but engineers are expensive, right? I mean, it's a high-paying field, and it only goes up after college, right? So if we're spending 4 hours worth of our engineering time, we're only going to be after people that we actually want to work with, right? You can be the smartest kid in the world, be able to reason through problems, have every fundamental in the world, know the syntax of all the languages that we spit at you, design a database schema that I wouldn't change, even a millimeter of. But if you don't have that personality, it's someone that we want to work with, right? Someone who's sitting in a room and have a conversation, we can bounce ideas off each other, someone who's fun to sit in a room with an hour, right? A lot of the problems we'll give, it's very similar to a real world problem, right? So, sometimes we'll have what we call, tech design meetings, where you step into a room with 2 or 3 guys, and you're like, okay, let's work through this together, right? We have no idea how we're going to design this new database. We have no idea how we're going to tackle this really complex problem. So let's figure it out, right? And we'll book a conference room for 2 hours, 3 hours, and we'll sit in there, and we won't come out until we have something, right? So if you're not the type of person that can sit in a room with for 3 hours, we're not going to work well together, right? So I just can't drive that home hard enough. I mean, if you're someone that we want to work with, and you're weak in algorithms or data structures, we will take you much more seriously than the reverse, right? We can teach you algorithms, data structures, right? It's very hard to kind of
make you a better person.
Yeah, make you a good person. I know it sounds kind of harsh. Anything you want to add here, Dave?
No, don't be a jerk.
Yeah. Who's been to a Ravens game before? Anyone? Yeah, it says it before every game. Don't be a jerk, right? That's like the easiest, most straightforward advice I can give you. Take criticism well. When we point something out, it's not because we're trying to embarrass you, right? We just want to see maybe something maybe you threw a solution at me I've never seen before, and I'm like, oh, well, what about this, right? You should be like, oh, you're right. Yeah, okay. Let me see if I can work with that and maybe alter it a little bit to make it faster, or to make it a little more stable, right? We actually just on Friday we did a session where we were designing a new database schema, and what we did was there was 3 of us in a room, and we each went up and presented our solution, and then the other 2 would poke holes in it. So one person would say, this is how I would design it, and the other 2 of us would sit there and we'd say, well, what about that? What about that? What about that? You're missing that. That's going to be too slow. And then we'd shore it up a little bit. Then the next person would present their solution. 2 of us would do the same thing. hole, patch, and the third, right? By the end, you have these 3 decent looking solutions and they're starting to kind of conform into something good, right? So interviews are basically, at least the way we do them, are connected the exact same way. We're giving you a problem, we're gonna poke holes, Can we have a little give and take, right? Can you help patch it up? Maybe I help patch it up. By the end, we come to a solution. And that kind of talks to that first point, right? We're not looking for the right solution. If I give you a database design problem, there's not one solution. I mean, there are better solutions and there are worse solutions, right? But if you went to Facebook and took the top 5 engineers from scratch on day 1 and said, design the schema for Facebook, you're gonna get 5 different answers most likely, but they're all gonna be decent, right? And they're all gonna help conform to a good solution, right? So I just can't stress that enough. We are looking for people who can work through problems. Any questions about that? Yeah.
How do you guys feel about people bringing in like notes during interviews? How do you feel about that?
I've actually never had that question posed to me. I've never had anyone do that. But I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I mean, if you have the notes to like a specific coding question I'm asking, then I might tell you to put them away, or I'll probably ask a different question. But no, I mean, a lot of times, even during phone screens, we'll do a screen share, and I'm fine if the candidate wants to Google, right? Because at work you can Google, you can go to Stack Overflow, you can look, and I'm not going to ask you a question that you can just Google and find on Stack Overflow if we're in that setting. Now, if we're in a whiteboarding setting, I might. So yeah, I mean, that kind of gets to a larger point, which is I'm not looking for your memory, right? I don't want to know that you've memorized some solution to bubble sort, right? I don't care about that, right? I care that you can find solutions with me in a work setting. We're looking for very practical people here, right? Other questions about that? No? Okay, so I'll give an example of a coding question we might ask. And this is probably, I mean, you can find hundreds of these online to practice through. All right, so read that, and someone raise their hand if they can, come up with a super quick solution. And I don't want an optimum solution, I just want the easiest solution.
You can just create a folder, create a variable that stores whatever, so like as you like pass through the array, create a variable that stores the current element that you're on, and as you each time you go, you can check against the variable, and I guess you will have to do like a if. You'll have to do like an if statement, or you have to do an if else kind of statement. Like if.
That's fine. That's fine. Think about it. Yeah. Anyone else? Speak up. I mean, yep.
Question. Is the K value being inputted?
Yes. Yep. I'm giving you an array of numbers, and a value K. And so all you have to do is find if the array has any duplicates that are within K of each other. Good.
So, like what he said, for loop, from starting to 0 to wherever the K value is, you increment it, and then if statement of the value that you want to check until you reach the end of K. And if it does, then you put yes, if it duplicates. If not, just no, you're fine.
What if the array is longer than K?
So it's another if else. Out of bounds.
Sorry, so the array itself could be like 100 elements, and K could be like 10, and we're looking for is there, so let's say, is the number 2 anywhere within the array less than 10 elements away from another number 2? So that could be at like index 10 and 15, or at index like 80 and 85.
Well, if the array is like n elements, then you have to go through like n minus k times like brute force and start at the first, and then check those k and like add them to a hash map, and then check is it in the hash map already. If it is, then you can immediately return true, and keep adding until you get to k, and then like restart and index 2, and then go until like.
Okay, so basically start at the first index, and you're looping through to to k distance, and you're looking for duplicate.
Yeah, like a nested loop of k, and then
Right.
n minus k.
Right, then you go to the next. Okay, so if you were to come up with that solution, so first question is there a naive solution? And when I say naive, brute force is probably a better way to put it. It's just, can you get through it right away, right? So that's the first thing we're gonna look for in an interview, right? We give you a coding question. I don't want the most optimum solution first. I mean, if you can come up with that right away, good for you. Most people can't, right? Most people need to first get some solution out on paper. And so in this case, yes, there's a solution to where you just start at the first element, you look through the rest of the array and see if there's one within k. If not, you move to the next element, right? You go to index 2 or index 1, look through the array, there or not, index 2, look at the array. And so, what's the O of n runtime of that? Does everyone know what O of n is?
Mm-hmm.
So what's the O of n runtime of that?
For the naive would be O(n)².
Right, n squared, right? That, something like that, right? We came to that in about 5 minutes, right? That's about what we're looking for. We ask a question like this, we're looking for someone to come up with the n squared solution in, under 5 minutes. And we just did that, right? So it's pretty straightforward. We're looking, can you at least come up with a solution, right? And that's what I was saying in the beginning, if you're gonna stare at me for 10 or 15 minutes trying to come up with the optimum solution, that's great, but like, I don't know that you're doing that. All I see is you standing there looking at me. Maybe you're just confused. Like, I have no idea. Talk it out. Maybe you don't get it right away, but you're like, oh, maybe I loop this way. Okay, then I loop this way, right? Talk it out with me, and within a few minutes, you're gonna have what we call the naive solution, right? A brute force solution. Now, the next thing we're looking for is, can you make it more efficient, right? And a big thing, at least that I look for, is I want you to be looking for this, right? So if you give the n squared solution, the next sentence out of your mouth should be, but I know I can make it more efficient. No one's gonna ask you a coding question in an interview that has an n squared solution, an n squared optimum solution, right? They want you to get that solution, but eventually the reason it's an interview question is because we're gonna test something a little more than just like, can you write a double for loop, right? But, okay, so now we're at this point. So can we make it more efficient? Does anyone have any possible ways we can make this more efficient? Yep.
You could split the array in half, compare the element k to the middle element, see if it would be in the first half or the second half, and then kind of.
How do you know if it would be in the first half or second half?
Comparing it to the middle element of the array.
Are you assuming that it's sorted?
Yeah, I'm assuming it's sorted.
Okay.
I mean,
it's
we
not
would have
sorted.
To sort it first.
Okay, so what's the runtime of that?
Probably.
Do you know what the runtime of sorting is?
They go with log n.
N log n.
Oh, n log n.
Yeah, n log n is sorted. So n log n is faster than n squared, right? So if you can come up with a sorted solution, that's usually a good step to start with, right? A lot of questions can be made more efficient by sorting an array. So if any problem does have something like, I'm giving you an array of something, there's often a solution that involves sorting it. It's usually not the most optimum, but it at least tells me, right, again, 'cause we're not looking for the right answer, right? Keep this in mind, right? I'm looking for, do you have computer science fundamentals? And right, the fact that you're bringing up, maybe if it's sorted, I can do something a little smarter than if it's not. Right there, that's something that now I know, okay, he's thinking, he knows something about computer science, he's done this before, maybe I can work with this guy, right? So that's a good, at least inkling, right? Maybe if I do something smart with a sorted thing. Okay, what else do we have?
And then we'll tell you that the array is not sorted, so.
Yes,
Let's try again.
exactly. Right. But that's a good, and if we say that, a good response is, okay, well, if I sort it, we're at n log n, we're already better than n squared. Can I do something smart now, right? So at least knowing that that is better than n squared, because you're right, our first response is going to be, no, it's not sorted. So anyway, it's still a good first step to a solution. You had your hand raised? Or someone here did.
Yeah, I was thinking you could use like a queue where you keep a maximum element of k elements in there, and then like once k gets full, then you go to the next one and like remove the first one, and then keep checking.
Okay, so you have a queue.
Yeah.
So you'll say we have an array of array of size 10. We can also do this on the whiteboard if you want, but
Yeah.
honestly, it's kind of good practice to talk this out because a lot of interviewers, actually Ali, our VP, did this to me. He gave a question like this, no pen and paper, no whiteboard. He just wants to hear you explain it. For the reason I said before, right? It's just about hearing you think. I trust you. Got a 4-year computer science degree. I'm sure you can write some code. Like I want to see how you think, right? So sorry, keep going. So you have a queue. So let's say the array size 10 and k is 2.
Yeah, kind of like a window where it keeps moving.
Okay.
Maybe you can do it in one pass where, like, every time you get to a new one, you check if it's in there, and then move the window down.
Okay.
Like,
So what's the runtime of that? Did everyone hear that?
I think it makes it be n times k.
It's n times k, right? Because for every n, you're gonna have this queue building of size k, and every time you get to one, you're gonna have to loop through k times to see if it's in there. Get the next iteration, you change k a little bit, change your queue a little bit, you gotta check k again. Now, k times n is good. That's at worst case, it's well. So if I give you k of size n, then it's n squared.
Yeah.
But so it's still variable, so it's not going to be one pass through because k is going to be some, on average it'll be n over 2. Let's say if we just take an average of all the array of all the possible k's I could give you, it's going to be somewhere between 0 and n. Okay, so what else do we have? You already got to a little bit, but what data structures can you use? Right, this is another thing we're looking for in coding interviews, right? Data structures. Super useful, it doesn't have to be complex, but I want to see that you know how to use them. I want to see you know the difference between a queue and an array, right? An array and a tree, right? We're going to use these things at work all the time, and so showing me that you can use them is great. And normally, when it comes to making a n squared solution, an n solution, it involves some data structure. It's pretty hard to do that in place without any extra memory. And that's also a good question to ask an interviewer, right? If you get a question like this, do I have extra memory? Right? Some interviewers will say no, you have to do it in place. But usually with a question like this, the answer is going to be yes, of course. You're running your code on a box somewhere and you're going to have memory to play with. So without even coming up with a solution, like what data structures can we use here that we haven't talked about already?
Stacks.
Okay, we can use a stack.
Just like the queue.
Stack's going to be very similar to a queue in terms of runtime. Yep.
Map of lists.
A what?
A map of lists.
A map of lists?
Yeah.
Okay, so the data structure is a map. Okay, so what's special about a map compared to an array or a queue? A hash map, a dictionary, whatever your language chooses to call it.
Constant read time.
Constant read time, right? You get a question like this, first thing that should be popping in your head is a map is constant read time. Does everyone know that? Does everyone know why that is? Has everyone worked with hash maps before? A hash, a dictionary, I don't know what JavaScript calls them. What languages do you guys learn? Java? Java? Okay, so Java's called a hash map, right?
I work with just the map function really in JavaScript and all that. Not really hash
a map
maps.
function.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know. It's kind of the same.
I'll have you guys turn around. Who here doesn't know what a hash map is, or how to use one? Okay. Okay. So maybe you guys are calling it something else. It could be you could call it a map, a hash map, a hash. And I ask you, is 2 in this array? Right. Well, what does the OS have to do to figure that out? What does the compiler or the interpreter have to do to figure that out?
Iterate. Go through each element.
Has to go through each element, right? So if you have an array of size n, what's the runtime of finding out if 2 is in this?
Worst case n.
Worst case n. Okay. You've seen bracket notation before? Let's just say these are like. Actually, I'll just use strings. Does this look familiar to anyone? A key value pair? A hash, a map, dictionary, whatever you call it. If I say, is B in this, what is the read time of this? How long does it take? Does it have to loop through every element? No. It can go right to the key and tell you if it's in there or not, right? So this is what's called constant time lookup, right? So this thing can be, you know, 1,000,000 keys long, and if I say, is B in there, it's gonna be constant. As opposed to if I put A, B, C, D in a list and I say, is B in your list, it has to scan through the array and find it, right? So one of the things that we're looking for a question like this, right? So you have some array, and let's say this array is A. Can everyone see this okay, by the way?
Yeah.
Or how large to make? Okay. A, B, C, A. That's the array I'm giving you, and I'm giving you K equals 4. Okay, now the solution we've come up with before is, okay, well, we're going to start here. We're going to say here's A. I'm going to loop through B, C, A, D until I find it. Now this is kind of easy because you're going to hit it on the first one. So maybe I'll make it so you have to get the C. Okay, so you start with A, and you're going to loop through, and you're going to say through K times. You're going to say, oh, I don't see A. Then I'm going to go through B. I'm going to loop through K times. I don't see B. I'm going to go to C. I'm going to loop through. Oh, I hit it. Right? That is what we call the n-squared solution. You can optimize it and make it n times k, right? But maybe there's another solution. Can anyone think of a, now that you know maybe a map is constant time lookup, how could we use that to make this faster? And I'll tell you, the solution is n. You can do it in one pass. There's actually a few ways you can do it in one pass.
For every element, you add a number. It's like A, you add a 1 for A value. So even if for K, there is a replicate, and then you plus 1. Just like counting salt.
Okay, so show me how you would do that.
It's just one. There's an element, there's this thing, you add a 1 value to it.
So
and
is
then
it,
look for K.
well, I'm adding 1 to what?
1 to that element value.
To this element value?
Just like abstract value. If then look for K possession, there's replicate, you plus 2, and it's greater than 1, then it's true. Otherwise it's false. Maybe something like that.
So where would you store those numbers?
Just an array, like counting salt.
Okay, keep thinking. I mean, you're onto something close. You do want to store something here. Someone else had their hand raised?
So I haven't used Symmetry yet. I have not used hash maps
Okay.
like for coding yet. Like from what you were saying, I was like if you create a hash map,
Mhm.
like and store the variables, and then run through the hash map,
Mhm.
and like would that save like time instead of like going through the whole array?
Depends how you store it.
Okay.
Yep.
I guess you could map the letter to the minimum distance from the next occurrence. So if there's no other occurrence, then it's 0, and if there's another occurrence to it,
Maybe we could try stepping through like what the map would look like
Yeah.
at each iteration.
So iteration 1, we're looking at A. What do we do? What are we storing?
So I like what you were saying.
Mhm.
So what happens? So we're looking at A. What would be the first thing you'd put into the map?
it'd be 0. Well, A value is 0.
Okay,
To-
so A and 0.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what?
And you would put B for 0, or the next
Right.
the next element.
You go to the next one?
Yeah,
Okay.
next element 0. Next element 0, so C would be 0. Next element D 0, and next element C. But it would have to be the distance from the previous occurrence.
How do we know the previous occurrence? Where the previous occurrence was?
It would be the position away from, or where the key value is.
So,
Or
so this is a little
Yeah.
thing with hash maps is the order is not guaranteed. It's a key value pair, but there's not a third thing, which is the index. Is what you're trying to say, like this is index 0, 1, 2,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so you lose all of that with a hash map, right? So an index, an array, you have an index and a value. In a hash map, you have a key and a value, but there's no guarantee that this is always going to be the third element, right? So if you do it in JavaScript, V8 can do whatever the hell it wants.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to keep it at the third order if it doesn't want to. But all right, so he's onto something. So let's go back a little bit. So anyone else have any ideas? I saw another hand raised. Might have been Nazo, was it you?
Oh yeah. I was wondering if you could explain kind of how map works, like how hash map works.
That is it's a much more complicated. Essentially, there's a hashing function that's used so, that it tries to guarantee.
My understanding is it would hash the value A to a place in, like a unique place in memory, and so when it's trying to look something up, it just runs it through the same hash map and goes to that spot in memory and fetches what's over there.
Basically, it runs through what's called a hashing function, which basically guarantees a unique place in memory. So when you give me A again, I can just say, let me go look up that value. I don't have to look through some list, right? It just says, oh, I don't even know if I've seen this thing A before, but I can run it through the same function. And if I get to a spot in memory where I have some value, then great, I must have seen it before, right?
We probably won't ask you that.
No, we're not gonna, just like we're not gonna ask you like, implement, arrays from scratch in Java.
Yeah.
Or linked lists, or I don't know what they teach you guys now. Okay, so any other ideas here?
Can someone maybe think about what information, what were the zeros providing us in your solution?
Basically, at first it's if it's unique, so 0 is that it's unique, and then if it's given a different value, that would be the distance from.
It's given a different value.
Well, if the value exists already, it would be the distance from its previous occurrence, I guess.
I feel like you're taking an extra step to do something that you could do originally. I don't know if I'm explaining my thought right, but what you said is exactly what I was looking for, and I think the zeros aren't doing anything for you. So
Yeah, like in that solution, we were storing the key, but the
you
zeros
could put
weren't-
anything in there.
Yeah, the values weren't giving us any information about that thing. You had your hand raised a second ago.
Yeah, I was thinking kind of what you were saying,
Okay.
about kind of storing the distance, like
Okay.
as the value, like the
Mhm.
distance between one occurrence
Mhm.
and the other.
Okay, so how would you do that?
So, like I was thinking about when you're looping through the array, you could essentially keep track of the index that you're currently at. And then once a duplicate comes up, you then, so you would store the index. So as
Okay.
you loop through.
So we'll start with the first iteration.
Yeah.
We're in our for loop. I is the index of this array. We're looping through the array.
Yeah.
And we're at I equals 0. So what do we do? We're storing A.
So A would be 0.
Okay.
Then B would be 1.
Okay, so we're storing B as 1.
Then C would be 2. D would be 3. Then once you came across C, you would compare the index that's currently currently at.
We're at
to
where
the-
I equals 4, right?
Yeah, and
Yep.
compare it to the index that is currently, right there. And then just subtract and get the distance.
There you go. You have a constant time and solution. That easy. Right. Does everyone see what he did? Right, in the first solution, we were basically writing a for loop to say a double for loop, which we're like, for A, we're gonna loop through the whole thing and look for A. Then we're gonna go to B, we're gonna loop through the whole thing and look for B. C, we're the whole, right? And that's the first solution we came up with. We came up with that in like 5 minutes, right, or less. Does everyone see why this is so much faster, right? Now we don't have to keep looping through this array over and over and over, right? We're just gonna say, we're gonna loop there one time. We're gonna go to A, we're gonna store the index. We're gonna B, we're gonna store the index. We're gonna C, we're gonna store the index. We're gonna D, store the index. We're gonna C, and we're gonna say, oh, it's already there. Well, what was the index the last time I saw it? All right, this is the fourth element, 4 minus 2. Is that within K? Yes, done. That make sense to everyone? Now, when the array is only size 5, it's not that big of a deal, right? But if I gave you a MySQL table of 100 million rows, and I asked you a similar question, right? And let's say you can't do some SQL magic, like I give it to you in memory, dump it in like a CSV file, and you have to do something like this, right? It's going to be significantly longer to do it the n squared way, especially if K is large. I mean, what if I'm just saying find duplicates in the in the first half of the list, right? You have to loop through 50 million rows all the time, right? In this way, you run through it one time and done. So essentially what we're looking for here, again, if you don't get to this, that's fine. Like, that doesn't mean we're gonna like cut off the interview or anything. What we're looking for is that you can ask the right sorts of questions, right? We got the n squared solution. Okay. A, do we know that that's n squared, right? We all kind of agreed that that was n squared, or maybe it was k times n, depending on how you implemented it. And then we immediately moved on to say, okay, well, we know we can do better, right? Anytime we're looping through arrays, we know that there's a faster solution. And then number 4, right? What data structures can we use, right? To do anything faster, it's going to require something. It's going to require some magic, right? It's either going to require you to use some data structure. It's going to require you to do some, algorithmic magic. There are solutions. We didn't go over them because we kind of skipped over it, but there are solutions where you sort it, right? You can sort it, and this problem might not help. There's a lot of similar array type problems where sorting really helps, and it gets n squared down to n log n, which is much faster. And again, like I know it kind of seems like theory, but if what we're kind of looking for with a candidate is 80% of our work, of engineers' work, most people can do, right? A lot of it's writing code, talking to databases, APIs, 90% of computer science graduates should be able to do it, right? But that other 20%, right? When, when I was working at Yahoo Sports, right? If it was the Super Bowl and the app crashed, like, who are we calling? It's a problem if half of our team can't help in that situation, right? We need everyone to be able to know kind of that top echelon of, okay, shit, something's breaking. What's breaking? Why? How do I make it faster? Is something inefficient? We have millions of people relying on this. Like, what are we going to do, right? And so, that's why we're looking for more than just, can you write a double for loop? Like, is everyone here computer science grad? Is that computer science, computer engineering?
Information systems.
Information systems. Okay. So how many here are information systems?
Information technology.
Information technology. Okay. And how many are either computer science, computer engineering? Most people. Okay. So that's interesting. So if I saw non-computer science, then I might dive into maybe I'd find out more about your degree and maybe dive into more database stuff as opposed to coding or something. It kind of depends on your background, because really we're just looking for smart people, right? But if you have a computer science degree, where I'm assuming most of your classes are geared towards coding, if not, that's a problem. I think most of the classes should be at least somewhat, or algorithms or something, even if it's just theory, right? I know that you can write a for loop. So what I care about is the extra, right? Like we're looking for, I want to find the top of the top. Any questions about all that? Don't be shy or anything like that. I'm an open book. This isn't an
Also,
interview.
questions not about that are fine as well.
Yeah. No questions? Okay, so that is one type of interview we might do, right? Something specifically geared towards an algorithm, a data structure. It tests a little bit of your coding knowledge, but it also is testing, do you know about sorting? Do you know about O of N runtime? Do you know about, the complexity of how code runs? Can you use data structures to make your code faster, right? Basically, are you beyond, a comp sci 101? Are you ready to come into a professional job and really make a big impact? And again, the way we just talked about it, right? An interview normally goes like that. It's back and forth. It's like, well, okay, let's try this way. You try that way. Okay, let's walk through it and see if it's fast or slow, right? I'm not expecting you to sit there and think for 5 minutes and just come up with this amazing optimum solution, right? If you were, we wouldn't be hiring you, as a first level engineer. We'd be hiring you as a senior engineer, right? So again, we're not looking for the same things that we're looking for out of a senior, but we're looking for you to be able to kind of push towards that solution, right? I want to see, okay, can I imagine this person in 3-4 years being a really good senior engineer? Like, can they learn quickly? Can they kind of push the bounds of what they already know, right? So, perfect example, if someone came in, they didn't know what a hash map was, that's not a problem. But if I explained it to you, right, then we should be able to have a conversation about, okay, how do I use this, right? And that's basically what we just did. All right, so now we'll go over a non-coding example. And these are usually pretty open-ended, and this kind of gets towards what you had brought up earlier. Design the database for Facebook. So, who wants to take a crack at it? Start throwing, yep.
So you would have to figure out the entities, like the user, and figure out the data flow, like the level 0 data flow diagram.
Kind of just got to that, yeah, exactly. Like, what are the use cases? And once you determine the use cases, you can come up with kind of the entities, the objects that we're looking for, right? What data do we need to store? Yeah, we need users. Okay, maybe we need posts. Maybe we need, how are we going to store the news feed, right? So yeah, but the first thing is, pretend you've never heard of Facebook, and we'll pick a company at random, right? Twitter, LinkedIn, Towson University, right? We'll just pick anything. It doesn't matter. The point is, can you and I, sitting in a room for an hour, come up with a solution that sounds good? And I don't care if it's the real way that Facebook does it. It probably won't be, right? It's probably going to be a lot simpler than the way that Facebook really does it. So what are the use cases? Another question, right? Should it be relational? Now, by default, I think most new college grads especially are most comfortable with relational databases. And that's fine. That's what most companies use for their core infrastructure anyway. So everyone here, it sounds like, had taken a SQL class before, right? So does everyone know what these terms mean? A one-to-one relationship, a one-to-many relationship, a many-to-many, right? These are key things we're looking for. Like, are you at least setting up your database properly? Do you have the right foreign keys? If something's a one-to-many relationship, are you mapping it correctly? Right? If something's many-to-many, are you using a join table? Right? Are you mapping things properly so that we're not going to hit some huge issue the day after we release it? Right? Any questions about this? Is anyone, not comfortable with these concepts? No? Okay. And here's another thing. This is something that if you really want to, in my view, wow an interviewer, this is something that a lot of times new college grads don't talk about. Because they've never been oftentimes have never had the experience of having to scale a solution from, your classmates or whatever, whoever's hitting your API to 10 million people, right? How will it scale? And that can be two different ways. That can be, in Facebook's case, okay, what happens when you have 1 billion users and 1 trillion posts? What's going to happen to your table? Like, you're going to have to do something, right? We're not expecting you to come up with some amazing solution here, but if you know to ask that question, you are already in the top 1% of new college grads, right? Most people are not even thinking that far ahead, right? When I first got to Yahoo Sports and we were building stuff, a fantasy football platform, I was completely kind of taken aback as to how, half the discussion was around scaling. I mean, out of 3 weeks of designing a database, the last week and a half was all about how does it scale. And so just being able to ask that question, knowing that we should be pushing the bounds a little bit. And not just about the size of the tables, right? What about, I have to query this table. What if I have to query it, 100 times a second, 1,000 times a second, 10,000 times a second? How are we going to do that, right? So who took a SQL class here? Okay, so you took a SQL class. So they went over database design. Did they go over, having a read replica? Okay, so if you had, you could talk to that, right? So these are things that you can just start doing your own research, creating your own projects, and kind of learning about some of these things that push the envelope. Again, these aren't things that we're requiring, right? This is, I think part of this discussion, what I'm trying to tell you guys is, these are how to stand out. This isn't like we're expecting new college grads to know all of this totally proficiently, right? This is like, how do you stand out in a crowd of thousands of applicants, right? If we go to a university fair and we get 1,000, or say we go to 5 universities, get 1,000 applicants. Well, how are we gonna we start doing phone screens, and you want to be the one that I'm coming to my boss later and saying, we got to talk to this guy, right? And so these are some of the things that come to mind that will really make you stand out. Kind of basically not knowing the solutions of a senior engineer, but asking the questions, right? Does that make sense to everyone? I think that's all I had. Yeah, so I want to open up a little for Q&A. I know we're kind of running out of time. We took a while on that coding question, but what kind of questions have you guys had? I mean, what sort of, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so I know you were saying you guys only basically did Java and Python when you were in college. So would you say it's better to just pick a language and really know it in depth than to know a whole bunch of different languages? Or would you should we try to get to know as many languages as possible while we're here?
That's a really good question. I'll give you my personal take on that, and then I'm curious what you'll say.
Answer.
Yeah. So, okay, so what a lot of, have you guys ever heard of the term a T-shaped engineer? No? Okay. It's kind of like a buzzword out in California, and it essentially means that you have a low amount of breadth of a lot of things and depth in one, right? So a T-shaped engineer, right? So we want, at least I want, someone who, if I show you JavaScript code, you should be able to reason through it. I mean, I don't care if you know the syntax, right? But I think depth on one thing is better than, if I'd rather have you 10% on everything and 90% on one than 30% across the board, let's say. But honestly, this really applies more for senior engineers. When it comes to new college graduates, I almost want to say don't even worry about it, because when we do a coding problem like that, we're looking at pseudocode, right? I mean, if you came up and drew what I just drew, where I just drew the arrays and the hashes, didn't even write a line of code, I'm perfectly happy with that, right? I trust that you know how to do a for loop in your favorite language, right? I don't really care about that. And if not, you can learn it. I care about how you think through a problem, and so So if you were to pose that question, I would say I would prefer depth in something rather than depth in nothing.
Or ability to adapt. So I would say no, you don't need to worry about a specific language. I had not worked with Python for 2.5 years when I started at ZeroFox. I had only done it at school, and then I worked at a Java shop. And then Python is one of the primary languages we use at ZeroFox. Being able to ramp up quickly is really the bigger thing, I would say.
Yeah, and same for me. Yeah, when I was at Yahoo, I did mostly Java and PHP, and then my startup, I decided to pick Python. Never done Python before. Picked it up in like a week. It's not hard, right? I mean, some languages are harder to pick up than others, right? Like Java will take you longer to pick up than Python. It's a compiled, it's a much stricter language, it's much more verbose. But for a lot of the languages that are being used today, especially on the web, Ruby, Python, Go, it's easier.
You'll also have a lot of examples to look from. So like if you start at a company, they're already, unless you're literally starting your own company, there will be existing code for you to look at with best practices that your company is using and for you to sort of model your own writing after. And then you'll just pick it up.
That's a really good point, yeah. And if a company will only hire new college grads if they know that that's the case, right? Like when we hire a new college grad, we know that you probably have never done Python or Go. If you have, that's bonus points for you, but it doesn't really matter. Like we're expecting, like we did seating arrangement charts today for some new teams that we were putting together. We're having a new hire on one of our teams, and that new hire is sitting right next to the director because he's fully prepared to walk this new hire through a language that he's never worked with, right? Through a new code base. A company that's willing to hire people out of college knows that they're going to be doing that. So, just basically not something you need to worry about.
Adaptability over knowledge.
Okay.
100%, yeah. And that kind of gets back to this, right? Or your question about notes. Yeah, we're not looking for memory, we're not looking for knowledge, right? We're looking for adaptability. Can you reason through something? Can you pick up something quickly?
Any other questions?
Yeah, what else do you guys have? You first, go ahead.
What makes you guys want to hire a college graduate compared to someone who's had years of Python? Like, what makes you want to choose college graduates at all, since we have not as much experience?
Sure. So, a couple things. One, new college graduates are cheaper, right? That's right. There's a reason that, and this is not computer science related, this is every field related, is you want a good mix of senior, very senior, somewhat senior, mid-level, junior. Part of it is cost, but part of it is also you're going to miss out on a lot of high potential, right? So if you're a startup that's just got your first seed funding and you're 3 people, you probably don't want a new college grad, right? Because you don't have time to nurture this junior engineer into becoming something amazing. But if you're a kind of a mid-sized company, a large company, you can do a lot with a high potential new college. They can become more senior than a senior guy I could find off the street, and faster, and in the code base that you guys are using, right? In fact, Rayborg's one of our best engineers, highest performing, and we got him right out of college. He's higher performing than some of the guys who were 10 years older than him. Got him right out of college, really high potential, and learned our code base in and out. There are a lot of perks to getting someone who...
I think it also depends on the stage of your code base too. So, like early on, as you might be trying to, there might be a lot of unanswered questions that you're trying to just, bushwhack through that require some more experience. But once you get to a stage where you're kind of like in feature development mode, your code base is pretty stable, you're getting to the point where like you just want to develop faster, and you don't need someone who necessarily is trying to like build the next Facebook database. They're just trying to, like they just got out of college and they're helping develop a new feature. Like, then you don't need a senior engineer to do that. And so that's like the cost-effective way to do things.
Right, and in addition to the cost-effective side, it's you want all your engineers to be happy, right? So if I have 3 projects and one is clearly I need a senior engineer on this, and 2 are, you know, features that my senior engineer is going to get bored with, but someone out of college who's never seen this before is a great learning experience, right? If I hire 3 senior engineers for this, 2 of them are going to quit. 2 of them are like, I already did this for 5 years. I know how to do this. I want to learn something bigger, right? But a new college grad who's never, you know, built a fully scaled API, you know, using, you know, the best new AWS services, right? That's a great opportunity for them to learn and grow. And so it's also just better kind of career development, right? You don't want to put people on projects. But if you have 50 engineers in a company, you don't have 50 senior engineer level things at all times, right? Like you're going to have varying levels of difficulty, and you want everyone to be happy with kind of pushing the bounds of what they know. So you want a good mix of seniority at any company. And again, that's not just true for computer engineering, that's true for basically every industry.
More questions?
Yeah, there was a few other hands. Yep.
So what are good places to learn more about like Python or something outside of school, online maybe?
Sure, yeah, I can speak to that, but do you have any specifics that you picked up when you were learning?
Oh gosh, it's been so long. Let me check my email. There is one that I have that they email me every so often, but you go first.
Yeah, there's the community at large. There's a couple known ones for every language. So like we're doing a lot of Go. I've never done Go before, and so the Go community has a full like 20-page tutorial on Go, like an interactive tutorial, which is very good. And so you don't, if it's just learning a language, you don't really have to pay for the Stanford online class or the you know, whatever other online, you know, paid courses there are. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you want to learn like machine learning or something, like, yeah, take a class and it's probably worth it. But for just learning the basics of a language or kind of getting in depth, there's a lot of really great free courses. And if you just Googled like, you know, best tutorial for Python or best tutorial for Go, there's probably a Stack Overflow answer with like, you know, 1,000 upvotes.
I'm pretty sure the service I used before ZeroFox was something called Code Wars, which is not specific to Python. It's just like an online platform you can sign up for that lets you do basically 1 million of those questions in whatever language that you want to practice in.
Code Wars?
Code Wars. That's one I get emails from.
Another hand over here. Yeah.
I was wondering, like, when you guys were interviewing, what were some, like, struggles or, like, difficult interviews that you guys had?
So long.
I know, it was long ago.
Not for you.
Yeah, but for, but again, so like, it's kind of, yeah, so like when I was just interviewing recently, I mean, I'm new, I'm like 6 or 4 months now in ZeroFox.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get many coding questions because we talked mostly through the stack at my startup that I built. You know, you have experience to talk through, and they're not going to ask you a whiteboarding coding question. When I was coming out, I remember being very focused on that first bullet point that I said, like, what is the right answer to a question? I forget. I was interviewing with someone for an internship, I think, and I remember it went really poorly. And I didn't realize at the time, but it was because I'm pretty sure I sat there and didn't say a word for like 15 minutes. Maybe I said something in the beginning, then I just sat there scribbling. It wasn't whiteboard, it was like pen and paper. I think it was at a career fair. And yeah, when I walked away, I remember thinking, like, that guy has no idea that I'm a smart person, that I can problem solve. Like, why would he? I basically didn't say anything. And I just tried to come up with these optimum solutions, never really got anywhere. This guy has no idea that I can code or anything, right? I forget what company it was for, but yeah, it was kind of at that point I was like, he is walking away with such a wrong impression in my mind. And so that's, ever since then, I've been very vocal in interviews, and yeah.
Just assume that you're also doing better than you think you are. You're going to think that you're doing terribly in many interviews when you're not actually doing terribly. That's probably the hardest thing to get over.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people take one of these whiteboarding questions and, you know, they don't get to the optimum solution, or maybe they get to some half solution, and they walk away thinking, oh, you know, all the other candidates got the perfect solution. Like, no. most candidates do not get a perfect solution, and you could very well be by far the best candidate we talk to. But we're going to constantly push, right? So you're going to constantly feel like, you know, you're not doing well, but you are. It's just, you know, we're going to constantly poke holes and see, you know, if we're just constantly giving you positive reinforcement the whole interview, you know, we're not doing either of us any justice, right?
What else?
Yeah, what else you guys have?
I was just wondering, like, I get kind of nervous, like talking in front of a lot of people.
Sure.
And so, I actually have an interview on Wednesday for Hughes Network Systems, and they told me like there's going to be like 5 people.
Oh, a
like,
panel?
Yeah, like a panel. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know how I'm going to dealing with that, and they can all ask different questions. And, yeah. Like, how did you get over being nervous, like communicating out like whatever idea you had, like to the problem they're giving you?
I never encountered a panel interview personally, which I'm thankful for. I feel like this is more like a psychology thing than a coding thing. I mean, you're gonna be nervous, honestly. Like, I think the answer to my answer to the previous question is the same thing that holds here. It's like you're probably gonna feel super nervous, and you're gonna like focus on like the one little thing you either missed or like could have like done differently the entire time. You're gonna get out and it's gonna be fine. Just try and remind yourself. Find someone who will call you up afterwards and be like, yeah, remember, like, you did fine and everyone else only had, 30 minutes to try and answer this really hard problem that was, not a 30-minute problem. And you're like, yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, I would say it's the same thing. It's kind of what we just talked about earlier is, look, everyone is like that, right? You're going to go on that interview thinking you're the only nervous one and I'm the only one that rambles. Like, no, every single candidate's going to feel that way. But I usually find that in those scenarios, I feel most confident when I feel confident about the material, right? So, if there's a panel of people and they ask me this question, right? If you've never answered a question like this in a setting with multiple people, it's going to be really nerve-wracking, right? Because you've never done it before, right? I've done this 100 times as an interviewer. I've done it many times as an interviewee. I've done it in a professional setting. So you can line up a panel of 50 people and ask me this question, and I'm going to feel pretty comfortable, right? So a lot of it is about, just practice these problems. And don't practice them by yourself. Practice them in front of people. Have your friend interview you. Have a panel of 3 people of your friends that know the answer, who are going to be judgmental, and have them interview you. Right? Get used to it.
I think the other part would be have a process that maybe you go through, like some sort of general steps. So literally, if I was going into like a phone screen, and I know I'm probably going to be asked some question that has to do with arrays or something along that line, I have like a set of bullets in my head that I reason through like off the bat, no matter what the question is. Like, would sorting help? Like, would a map help? And and so on and so forth. So for like those types of questions, I just go through that process. And sometimes, is sorting going to help? The answer is no, it's not. Okay, move on to the next bullet point, move on to the next bullet point. And that just gives you a little bit of like, rather than focusing on, I don't know this problem, like just focus on the generic steps that can be applied to 90% of the problems that you'll be given. Just focus on that.
Yeah, and do interviews yourself of your friends. Like, be on the other side. Be the person who's doing the interviewing, right? Do these practice rounds. You be the person that knows the answer, and ask them a question, right? Who doesn't know the answer, and you're going to start seeing the pitfalls that they fall through, because you know the answer, right? So you're going to start seeing, ooh, they missed this, or ooh, it took them a while to get to that point, right? And then when you hear a similar problem, you're going to remember what it felt like to be on the other side. And you'll be like, oh, well, I'm not going to fall into that pitfall because I just watched this guy do it for 20 minutes. So I'm not going to, right? So you're going to kind of already have seen the pitfalls that most people fall through from the other side. So honestly, this just kind of, these practice sessions, I think they're extremely helpful. And yeah, I completely agree with what David said as well.
Have you ever had or even like consider people who come back for like a second interview that the first one failed, not because they were a bad person or
I
something
mean,
like that?
they interviewed, we didn't give them an offer, they went
Yes.
to work somewhere else and then came back.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like, is that common or like, what kind of?
Sorry, you mean someone? Sorry,
Like if I interviewed at Zero Fox, did not get an offer, worked somewhere else for a year, then interviewed again.
Oh, you're saying we turned you away first?
Yeah.
Then you worked somewhere else, came back a year later.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Or like try to get better at whatever you weren't good at. Like
Yeah. As long as, like you said, as long as it wasn't that last bullet point.
Yeah.
As long as it wasn't like you were really abrasive, unwilling to take feedback. I mean, whatever it is, right? I mean, that's super rare to find someone, especially in our field. I feel like most people want to learn and have a good vibe about them.
Also, depending on the company, is like if you were doing that with Google, like the people that are interviewing you are probably gonna have never seen you before. It'll be like a brand new interview, honestly. So,
yeah. In my mind, you're basically a new person now, right? You spend you spend an entire year learning something. Like, great. I want to like, maybe you're better now. Like, you probably are. Let's talk, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, oftentimes when we interview a new college grad, and we think they're smart, they have high potential, but maybe we're at a stage in our company where we don't have time to really nurse that right now. But we can tell that you're kind of onto something. Like, we want to see where you're at, right? We'll reach back out to you in 6 months or a year, right? Well, maybe you go get an internship somewhere. We reach back out to you like, look, hey, we liked you a lot. You're a little too junior. We didn't really have time to spend on you then. We do have a little more time now. We'd love to talk again. I mean, this, networking is a huge thing, right? You don't want to let, smart, high potential people fall through your fingers. Sometimes you have to for business reasons, but
it's not permanent.
Definitely not permanent. No. At any given time in a startup, we want the best people at any company, not even startups. We want the best people we can find, regardless of any other determining factors.
Because I've heard a lot of like horror stories, not really horror stories, but situations where resumes or something like that was handled through an HR or someone who just throws resumes to the side and doesn't even try to consider.
Yeah, that's their loss then.
That is their loss. Yeah. We don't do that. We sometimes we have HR look through resumes, but it's almost always an engineering manager. And then HR will usually do the first call. After an engineering manager has approved a resume, HR might do the first call just to get to know you, make sure that you are interested in us, and everything kind of fits with your timing and all of that. And then you'll go to an engineer to talk. But yeah, I mean, if non-technically qualified people are throwing away resumes, that's just bad business. Yeah, and I'm sure that happens a lot. Yeah. What else you guys have?
So, like now, it's like when you're like in college, would you say you should be shooting as far as like the best place for you to be in? Would you say you should be shooting to be at like startup companies? Because I feel like some people say like working at like a startup would give you like more chance to like get more like hands-on like experience, and then other people like say like shoot for like big name like companies. You just like on your resume it just looks better than to like say some random startup in Baltimore. It's like if you were in our shoes, would you be like applying to like specific like startups, or would you be shooting for more like known companies?
The second part I don't think is as big of a deal as you might think it is. Like someone working at Google or not. I mean, I think it's positive, but if someone doesn't have Google on their resume, it doesn't mean that I'm like, oh, like they must not be good.
It's a positive, not a negative.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it'll make us look at your resume for sure if you're like, oh, I worked at Google for 5 years, but if you don't have that, it's not going to knock you.
Right, and I think the quick answer is that there is no best, there's no best answer there. It honestly just depends on your situation. I know coming right out of college, so the benefits of startups are they're more hands-on, they're also riskier. Startups often fail, and that can be very painful. And also depends on your life. I mean, startups can also have a lot of work-life balance issues. So if you're not in a place where you're able to deal with that, or you just don't want to deal with that, that is a perfectly valid thing to not want to have to deal with. And bigger companies are usually better. They're not, you know, waking you up late at night to fix something that's exploding on production, right? So
Yeah, there's no right answer. I mean, I've worked with people who started off as startups. I've worked with people who start big. You get benefits of both, right? If you start at a big company, you'll get to see how technology scales from the ground. Not from the ground up. You can see how it scales already at scale, dealing with really big problems, which is really cool. But you miss out on the bottoms up scaling, right? How do I first set up AWS to do what I want it to do, right? And vice versa, right? If you start at a small company, you get to see all of that bootstrapping, but you're never gonna, most likely, not gonna deal with hundreds of millions of users, and it's just different problems. I would say that starting off at a really small company, like less than 10 or 15 people, is probably tough for a new college grad because they're likely to not have the resources to really help you. Not to say that's every small company, but it's probably going to be harder. But if there's startups that are larger, they're probably going to have the similar resources to maybe not a Google, but to a large tech company. Yeah, and that's a really good question because a lot of people struggle over that. I would say any company that's like Series B or higher would probably have the necessary qualifications. I mean, there probably are Series A companies that are super well funded that have 30, 40 engineers that you can learn a lot from. Most Series A companies are 10, 15 people still.
So what are some good things that people should highlight on their resumes to increase their chance of getting an interview?
That's good.
I'm trying to think. Well, it's different for college grads and senior engineers. I can't. I would say, some level of involvement in like the computer science club here, or just some.
One, right?
Yeah. I don't think it's a requirement for people to have their own side project that they're doing, or publishing to GitHub and showing all of that. I think if I get a sense from a resume that the student did well in their classes, and graduated with a computer science degree, they have the knowledge there, the basic computer science knowledge there, then great. I definitely won't turn you away if we're looking for that junior level. But for more senior level, I'm looking for what specific I'm looking for describing what you did at the positions you were at. I'm telling you this because let's say you go work somewhere and then you're updating your resume. I find that describing when I was at X, I worked on the back-end data analysis engine for this, or I was responsible for this. Which you can also do if you're right out of college, if you were in a computer science club or some other sort of leadership position somewhere.
Yeah. The putting down that you are in the computer science club, right?
Mm-hmm.
That'll make you stand out. Posting a GitHub profile, GitHub link to some cool stuff you've built, right? In our mind, if you're confident about the code you write, then show us. If we go through your GitHub profile and oh wow, look at this, you did some cool stuff, we'll interview you. Trying to think other, even outside of computer science leadership roles. If you were the president of your fraternity or something, put that on your resume. That's definitely not negative. Yeah, basically anything outside of your normal coursework that you can speak to well, right? Because the one thing that I hate, and I think most interviewers hate, most managers hate, is when you put something on your resume and then I ask you about it and you're like, oh, well, I really didn't design like the whole thing, and like you can't really, you know. So I've heard people say like, you know, I designed and implemented this amazing Python Django API, and I deployed it, and everything was amazing. And then I get on the phone with you for the first time. I'm like, wow, you deployed this all yourself. Like, you used AWS. Like, where'd you deploy it to? And they're like, I'm not really sure. Or like, okay, then you didn't deploy it.
I would also say just, yeah, like especially at your guys level, just like showing like a leadership position or like a dedication to something. So like, you know, I did 4 years of college sports, like I obviously put that on there. Or I did 4 years of college acapella, I put that on there as well, just showing that like I'm committed to working hard at things, you know.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. Showing that you are someone who can follow through to excellence of anything. Yeah. Right? It doesn't have to be computer science related at all. Yeah. Right. I became the best trumpeter and whatever. Like that's great. Like show us that. Like if you can do that, then I promise you can learn to code. Yeah. What else? Yep.
I have a follow-up question to that. So you're saying how if you did one thing a lot, it looked good. What about like if you worked at, let's just say, Walmart for 3 or 4 years? Does that stand out? Like you did school sports for 3 or 4 years. Different than that, you worked. Let's say you worked at retail for 3 or 4 years. Does that stand out the same as doing school sport for 3 or 4 years?
I look at them differently. It wouldn't be an either or. So the sports thing shows me that you, at least in my mind, you're striving for excellence at something, right? So sports, music, something like that, it's usually about mastering a skill. Working in retail is less of that, I think, but it does show like, if I have 2 resumes and one person got a 4.0 computer science, and they don't have anything else, and this other person's 4.0 computer science, and they worked 30 hours a week at Walmart, well, this one did more, right?
Or not even a 4.0, but also just the just like work experience in general can be helpful. For a brand new college grad, work experience can show, like there are things separate from computer science that you have to do when you work.
So even if it's not like in like an office situation or something, you can still.
You probably had to work in teams with people and go like figure out how to get stuff done when you didn't know exactly what you needed, or just the workplace dynamic stuff. You then have like a leg up on someone who did nothing else, just went to their classes and did their schoolwork.
Right, and I think to the specific scenario, if you worked at Walmart one summer, that's not going to show me anything. But yeah, you worked at Walmart for 4 years, and that shows commitment, right? Like I mean, the average tenure at a software company is like 2 years. So if you were able to work at Walmart for 3 or 4, that's good, right? I mean, one thing you don't like on a resume normally is job hopping, right? You don't want to see people who have been out of college for 4 years and they've been at 3 jobs. And it's usually not positive. You want to see someone who's willing to commit to something through. So the same thing would apply to anything really, including a retail job. Yeah. Anything else? No? Anything else from you? Sure.
Good.
No? All right. Well, yeah. Thanks a lot for having us, guys. Thank you.